You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for September 10th, 2024. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where this week we watched two Criterion Collection movies, Casablanca and Repo Man, because, yeah, we're that couple. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Yes, we like good movies.
We like good movies. And
what do Casablanca and Repo Man have in common? They're both good movies.
They're both good movies, and they're both well cast, and they're both
both now part of the Criterion Collection. Yeah. Congratulations to Repo Man, and congratulations to the Criterion Collection for figuring out that Repo Man is one heck of a movie.
It's a heck of a good movie, and we enjoyed it, and we will probably be tapping into the Repo Man vibe at some point to do a little thing we call Science Fiction University.
Yeah, because it's science fiction, for sure.
It is.
Yeah. But look, we are recording this show on Tuesday before the debate tonight.
Yep.
And we know that for the last few days, that's just about all anyone's talked about. And whatever happens tonight, and for the next few days, that's going to be the dominating the news cycle.
Yep.
That's
everywhere.
We understand that.
Yeah. And also, if everything goes to plan, Blue Gal, and sometimes it doesn't, I will be on the Brad show tomorrow at a radio program station near you. Also, he records it so you can listen to it later as a podcast. I'll be on with Brad Friedman and Desi Doyen and, of course, the inimitable Digby. And we'll be raking the ashes of whatever the hell goes on tonight, which means I have to stay up past my bedtime to watch the damn thing and to do a shot every time someone says bipartisanship or unify the nation. What are you going to do to unify America? Which means I'll be drunk by about 9:30.
9:30, I would say.
It's going to be a long day and a long night.
Yeah. We had a couple people asking about the Matthew Sheffield show, too.
Yes.
It's called Doom Scrolling.
Yes.
And I don't know if your episode is up yet over there.
I got a message from him. He needed a photograph of me. And so I sent him along a photograph of me. And he said, that'll work. So he's in the, I guess, final stages of preparation. Post-production. That's right.
Post-production. You know, our post-production turnaround is about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I think his takes a little longer because he does video. So,
well, he should use cat treats because that's what we use to make ours go run a little faster.
We have the cats walking across our keyboard a lot. So,
yeah.
Look, so for this particular show, given that we are reserving some of our energy to watch the debate tonight, and I'm going to be doing postcards to voters during the debate.
Yep.
To keep my blood pressure down. We're going to relax, put our feet up today on today's show and talk about things other than the debate.
Right.
But first I should talk about my blood pressure because I am furious that this debate is even happening. I'm furious that the mainstream media pushed Joe Biden out of the race and left Donald Trump in. And there is just no reason that the Republican Party should exist anymore, having voted 60 times to take away my health insurance, having lied us into war. Thank you, Dick Cheney. We're going to get to him in a minute. You know, and now they're trying, after arguing over and over again, that their only motive was to return the abortion issue back to the states.
Right.
Now that it's back in the states and states are holding a referendum from time to time about abortion to allow the citizens to make a decision. We're turning it back to the states so that states can decide. Oh, okay. Well, Missouri's going to vote whether they're going to allow women to have bodily autonomy. Oh, no, we're taking that off the ballot.
Yeah, no. We don't want people voting on that shit locally.
No.
That's crazy.
That's bad for us.
Right.
Well, fortunately, the Supreme Court of Missouri said, yeah, it's got to stay on the ballot.
Yeah.
But all they need is one Trump-appointed judge.
That's it.
And they've got plenty. They've got the crazy one in Texas who'll do just about anything. And I'm just furious. I mean, I was furious when when Hillary had to debate him.
Right. And she kicked his ass over and over again.
His spit is not worthy to clean her shoes.
Yeah, no. This is it, and here's the dirty secret. Let me tell you 2 dirty secrets, Blue Gal. Let me whisper them into your ear. Number 1, everybody knows it.
Yes.
Every person, every sentient being sitting behind a keyboard in the legacy media fucking well knows it. And by some force that we can only speculate about, because no one will say what it is, no one is allowed to say aloud what everybody knows. And when you live in a country where no one is allowed to say aloud what everyone knows, like everyone knows the Iraq war is going to shit in a handbasket, but no one's allowed to say it, because if you say it, you're out, you're exiled forever. You know things are about to break and something bad is going to happen. And what everybody knows also is the problem with the Republican Party is full of Republicans.
Right.
Right. There's a word that you're not allowed to use in the media when talking about the Republican Party. That's the T word. That's trajectory. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to talk about that, because that implies there's been a path to get here. And along the way, there were big screaming warning signs that we were heading in the wrong direction. And at every point along that 30, 40-year road, the people who were supposed to be jumping up and down, waving their arms, going, you shouldn't do this, this is bad, this is going to fuck our country up, were the very people who said, nah, both parties are pretty much the same. Nah, mostly this is just a bunch of liberal, angry, cranky liberals talking a bunch of nonsense. And now we've arrived there. And those same people are so busy scrubbing the past and sandblasting the past.
Well, I was just going to say Mike Barnacle asked that question, right?
He did.
He asked, how did the Republican Party get there? But because he's sitting his ass on the stage at Morning Joe, he's not allowed to ask prior to 2017.
No, nothing happened
Late
prior to 2017.
He's not allowed to ask, Joe, you helped Donald Trump write his first speech to Congress. Well, what the hell happened to you?
And
you helped this happen.
That's us. I mean, the only people who are allowed to talk about this shit are the court jesters.
Right.
The people who are willing to be laughed at and say true things, except, of course, in the case of the court jester, the idea was to make the emperor laugh enough that he didn't take your head off.
Right.
Which is, which might happen if Trump wins. Yeah. But that's the maddening part of this. Everyone knows the emperor has no clothes. Everyone. Yeah. Everyone's pretending that he does, because we need it to be a horse race, and we need the Republican Party to be the imaginary Republican Party of David Brooks's dreams, so that we can continue doing what we've been doing for decades. And what you've been doing for decades is what got us here in the first place. Anyway,
we also have some breaking news from the dead husk of Newsweek magazine, which is now just a clickbait website.
Yeah, it's a sewer. It's a fucking
quote,
sewer.
Breaking Newsweek reports that Tulsi Gabbard says Kamala Harris trained like an actress ahead of the debate.
Oh, unquote. No. Oh, no. She did? Oh, no.
And what can we say to that except...
There you go again.
Yeah, an actor.
An actor. Oh, my God, an actor.
You mean an actor on a reality TV show?
Yeah.
Or an actor on old B Westerns? What actor are you talking about? Yeah.
Well, that's because, no memory. There's no memory. Yeah. There's no memory at all. And every accusation is a confession.
Yep.
Now, let's you and I just grab that third rail, Blue Gal. Let's just join hands and grab the third. We're going
to talk about what no one wants to talk about in the mainstream media, right?
So, and a whole bunch of our progressive friends would rather just kind of elide. And that's fine. That's what they do. This is not what we do. What we are going to do today is talk a little bit about a guy named Richard Bruce Cheney, Dick Cheney, and about what the Cheney political dynasty is up to, because that's who they are. They are a political dynasty, and they're building a political dynasty for the long term. Now, remember, a very big reason why the rank and file of the GOP loves them some Donald Trump is that he absolved them of responsibility for the failure of the Bush administration. He stood on stage and said, George Bush lied us into the war and fucked that war up. And here's his fucking brother staring you in the face. And it wasn't anybody's fault but George Bush. It was George Bush who did it. He did the Bush off machine. He was a human walking, talking Bush off machine. And that absolved everyone else of responsibility for all the shit they talked and all the support they had for Bush and all the times colleagues of mine were poking me in the chest, telling me what an un-American bad person I was because I questioned the inerrant judgment of George Bush as an economic and military genius. And if the base hates George Bush now because He caused them to be publicly humiliated in front of the liberals. They really, really fucking hate Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
Man, do they hate Dick Cheney. Because Dick Cheney is all of that, and he's a murderous robot. And he's vicious, and he clearly has contempt for them. He doesn't hide his contempt for the base very well, and he never did. So
he's an aristocrat.
He's an aristocrat, and he's a cruel and obnoxious and evil aristocrat, and he doesn't hide it. No. And that's the thing. Now, Dick Cheney, let's be very clear about one thing, never gave a shit about democracy. Never. He was all about the power. Dick Cheney would not have had the career Dick Cheney had unless he didn't give a damn about democracy and cared only about power, specifically unitary executive power being wielded by someone named Cheney, which is why if you watch the movie Vice, you will see step by step him hemming in George Bush and putting all of his people in place and putting up an office for himself at the Pentagon, an office for himself at the Vice President, an office for himself over in Congress, so he could run everything and surround poor, dumb George Bush with advisors who only told Bush what Cheney wanted him to hear.
I was going to say it's Project 2025, but it's one guy.
It's one guy. And
right?
And it's one guy who, as you've pointed out a million times, never cheated on his taxes, crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, made sure he stayed out of jail and his family stayed out of jail. He
made sure that the liberal media couldn't come at him in some obvious way.
Right. Committed torture, set up black sites, broke every moral rule of everything you can think of, and was just a fucking evil human being and still is. But kept his nose clean. He was lawful.
Well, and he didn't care about money. Never took a bribe.
No, he
never. When he made all that money off of the Iraq War, he donated it to the heart hospital that gave him his new heart as a charity, and did it according to Hoyle. He did everything right. Gave away $26 million, gave it to a third party to handle the donations, didn't take it as a tax write-off. He doesn't care about money. No. Because he's got all the money. He's got more money than God.
He cares about power. That's all he cares about.
Exactly.
That's all so he is lawful evil, and Trump and his daughter is lawful evil, and Trump is chaotic evil, but they're both evil. They're all fucking evil.
But that's what the Cheneys don't want. They don't want the chaos.
Right.
They want the security of the deep state.
And that's why Liz Cheney was with Trump right up until after J6. Right. J6 was chaos. J6 was not handing power over to the unitary executive to be a dictator. Yeah. It was seizing it and doing it on fucking camera where everybody could see what a monsters the GOP was.
And using the base mob to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's bad for business.
That's bad for bad publicity, man. That's bad for the brand. You know, Trump fucked up the brand, and Cheney's spent their entire life building that brand. Yeah. Yeah. And since Dick Cheney is 800 years old and he's about 65% machine now, and has been waiting in death's anteroom for decades, his dream of unitary executive power lives on in his mini-me, Liz Cheney.
Who was in the Rose Garden when the House voted to take away my health insurance. She was at that beer blast, smiling and waving and patting Trump on the back. And this was a Republican thing.
And remember, everyone's real mad about Donald Trump talking about how Democrats want to murder babies, right? Democrats want to murder babies after they're out of the womb. We're not talking about abortion now. We're talking about Democrats murdering babies. That was Liz Cheney's talking point right up until they kicked her out of the party and she had to go find a place to crash for a while. And she was, Democrats were the face of pure evil. Pure evil. Not Trump, us. And she would praise Trump and talk about Democrats murdering babies, being the face of pure evil. So, and that's why people who, craved her endorsement didn't want to talk about any of that stuff and really told everyone who was talking about it to shut up. Shut up. Well, no. I mean, if you want to get her approval, even after all that, you're free to do so. And I'm free to point out that she's just the same awful fucking human being she has always been. And that's the important thing to remember, because the Cheneys haven't changed. Yep.
But the only effect that Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris is going to have is convincing 100,000 MAGA Republicans who might have otherwise stayed home that, there really is a deep state. Because Dick Cheney and Bernie Sanders and AOC and George Soros really are all in it together to get the demon rat into the White House.
We told you it was a conspiracy. And Barack Obama's pulling the strings, man. And Ukraine is our real enemy, man. Yeah. And that's, that's all we need.
And then money, please, right? Yeah. Because my podcast said that. Mm-hmm. Maybe we could get $100,000 for this episode from the Kremlin, from RT.
I would prefer to get $5 from decent
I would
Americans.
Turn down the money, I'm afraid. Yeah. Tim Pool, you're an idiot.
You're an idiot. And you're a bad person. You're not just stupid. You're a bad person.
And also an idiot.
Yeah.
But seriously, paint me a picture of any actual human voter who has been so solidly in Trump's corner for 9 years, and they've backed him through all of it. They've backed him through, the Access Hollywood tape, through January 6th.
Through COVID.
All of it. Inject bleach.
Felonies,
and they backed him through it all. And but it's still so on the fence that they can be turned into a Harris voter, on the word of Liz Cheney. There is no such person.
This is the tiny group of never Trumpers who are crashing on our couch and slowly taking over the media, or quickly taking over the media, and trying to take over the Democratic Party. They need a hero. Mm-hmm. And by God, we're going to make her a fucking hero, despite the fact that she has.
And if it gets just enough Nikki Haley primary voters in Indiana, mm-hmm. or whatever state it is, to carry Pennsylvania, some Pennsylvania suburban Philadelphians, men, to go, well, Dick Cheney's voting for Kamala Harris. I guess, I'm a national security voter most of the time, so I guess I have to go with that because Trump was a danger to national security. Just enough to tip Pennsylvania over, just enough to tip Georgia over, mm-hmm. to the point where Kamala Harris has 300 electoral votes mm-hmm. coming out of November. Mm-hmm. I'm good with that, but that does not make the Cheneys my hero.
It's also an unprovable hypothesis.
It is. You don't know. You have no idea.
This is the same road. This
is
the same road we went down with the Lincoln Project.
Right.
That swore up and down that they were the ones who won the 2020 election for Joe Biden. No, they didn't. They absolutely didn't.
No.
They made porn for liberals.
Yep.
And it was very good porn, and they got paid very handsomely for it. But this idea that they're out there lurking in the bushes, nobody can ever find these people.
No.
No one can ever find the voter. They've gone through 1 million Ohio diners, and they have polled and polled and assayed and measured and gotten the calipers out for all kinds of Republican voters. I've yet to hear them say, here's a Republican voter who was solidly for Trump for 9 fucking years. Through it all, like you said, through everything. But since Liz Cheney, who we now hate because she betrayed us, says mm-hmm. that Kamala Harris is my gal, I guess I'm going to vote for that communist.
The demon rat, right.
The demon rat that you've trained me for 30 years to think, plus she's black and a lady. But, there is no such person. There just isn't.
No, and the points of data that are pointing my mind toward 300 electoral votes. And again, I need to run outside, turn around in the snow 3 times and spit. I understand that.
Exactly.
The increase in voter registration since Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee, because that's a very definite data point that you can point to and go, oh my mm-hmm. God, the intention there of I'm going to go out and register to vote mm-hmm. is huge.
Yes.
That data point, then the data point that I heard the other day of 4% of the registered voters in Georgia, mm-hmm. 4% have volunteered to work for Kamala Harris.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the drop in food prices, which was announced this week.
Right.
The largest drop in food prices since they started recording food prices.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And as I said on Twitter, it's amazing what the suggestion of an investigation into price gouging brings.
Yeah. Like we talked about last week. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. AI,
you start suggesting we're going to start looking into this. Yeah. It's like, we don't need those profits to be quite so high all of a sudden.
So thank you, Amy Klobuchar, because that's a Democratic proposal. It's a Democratic bill proposed.
Well, and that's not going to stop the investigation.
No,
but
of course
they're going to be it was seasonal. Well, it was COVID. Well, it was this. And things are back to normal now. So turn off the heat. But They're thinking that way.
But as to the case of Liz Cheney, the extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And the claim that there are these phantom voters out there who are dead set against everything Democratic and will never, and Trump, blah, 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 we're going to do it and whatever. But now that Liz Cheney's endorsed Kamala Harris, we're flipping. I need to see solid evidence of that, or I'm not going to believe it. Because you know what I know about the Cheneys and Republicans generally? They lie all the time.
A lot. And this is reputation management.
It is.
Which they are also good at. They are trying to erase, and I said this all over social media. Thank the Cheneys, but don't shake their hands.
Yeah.
That Iraqi civilian stuff doesn't wash off.
Yeah. Well, 2017, out there on social media somewhere is me saying Trump exists to normalize Bill Kristol.
Yeah.
And doubly so for Dick Cheney.
Yep. There's only really one sort of person that Dick Cheney can still impress, Driftglass.
Yeah.
Can you guess what sort of person that is?
I believe I can, but please, play on.
So Dick Cheney, stalwart conservative. No one can accuse him of being a rhino Republican in name only. He served, I think, 4 Republican presidents, if memory serves me correctly. What do you see as the significance of their dual support for Kamala Harris, Steve?
Who knows? Maybe he's swinging left. He's going to move to Park Slope. He's going to become a hippie.
That I'd like to see.
For a lot of Republicans, character comes before policy. And I think the Cheneys are among those Republicans, and there were a lot of Bush Republicans for whom that was just an article of faith. The other interesting thing is about how interesting a decade the 2010s was, when the Republicans had a total hostile takeover from outsiders, Trump and MAGA. And so it left all the Bush people I know like, we can't support this. Not all, but 80% of the Bush people, and President Bush and Dick Cheney are among them.
Yes, that was David fucking Brooks of the New York fucking Times and PBS and NPR and The Atlantic and lecturing at every college you can think of and professor of humility at Yale, speaking on behalf of the former ruling class of the GOP, telling 4 lies, 4 absolute whopper lies in quick succession, which you got to think that that's Trump level lying that fast and that broadly. So let's count them together, shall we? Let's count the lies together. David Brooks says for a lot of Republicans, character comes before policy. That's bullshit. I call bullshit on that. There's no evidence that is true at all. Here's David Brooks. And I think the Cheneys are among those Republicans. That is, unless you believe the principle they believe in is unlimited power for people named Cheney, then I say that's 100% unalloyed revisionist bullshit. And then here's David Brooks. And there were a lot of Bush Republicans for whom that was just an article of faith. Now, if by Republicans he was referring to like Eisenhower Republicans, I might allow it. But those Republicans are all dead. So I got to call bullshit on that too. And I believe Stuart Stevens would agree with me. And he wrote a book called It Was All a Lie, which went into this in greater depth than I have the time to do on a podcast. But it's all bullshit. But then comes the big one. This is David Brooks. The other interesting thing is about how interesting, the use of the word interesting twice means he's about to tell you a very big lie. A decade, the 2010s was, when the Republicans had a total hostile takeover from outsiders, Trump and MAGA. Okay. I wrote, 100, 200 posts about there is no Tea Party. There is no Tea Party. They're just fucking Republicans in funny hats. And for a long time, the media just kept pretending this was a brand new political movement until 2 people suddenly, after the damage had been done, said, oh, no, they're just Republicans. And those 2 people
asked them who they voted for in 2004, and they voted for George W. Bush.
I voted for George Bush, and then Romney, and then yeah, okay. And but after all the damage had been done, 2 prominent conservatives came out and said, oh, yeah, those are Republicans all along. I walked past a television set, and those are my support. The 2 people who said, oh, yeah, it was Republicans all along were Joe Scarborough and David fucking Brooks.
Yep. So
this is so far beyond mere bullshit that I'm kind of challenged to find the right words to describe how bluntly Brooks is lying here. This is David Brooks unable to face the reality that his party has been revealed as the hollow, amoral collection of ghouls and grifters that we crackpot liberals have been saying all along. This is David Brooks.
Don't forget racist.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget the racism. A lot of racism in there. This is also David Brooks, formerly of the inner circle of smug, sanctimonious, conservative aristocrats, trapped forever in the amber of 2016. It's always going to be 2016 for David Brooks. He's trapped in that moment just after he swore that everything was fine, just fine, real good, great, excellent with his Republican Party. They'd gotten over that whole thing they were going through in 2014, the stain of Sarah Palin, and now everything was just fucking great. Unlimited ceiling. After which he watched his party gratefully deliver themselves into the flabby fascist embrace of Donald Trump. While he was impotently declaring over and over again, it's going to be Rubio. I'm telling you, it's going to be Rubio. This is a man who is broken and is lying because he has no other choice.
So since Dick Cheney never gave a shit about democracy and only cares about unlimited power in the hands of his daughter, and, you know, I'm sure he'd like to continue to have no bid contracts for Halliburton down the road as well.
Yeah.
What is Dick Cheney really up to? Who is actually getting the better deal here? What does he get out of this?
Now listen to me. I beg of you not to do this thing. If Potter gets a hold of this building and alone, there'll never be another decent house built in this town. He's already got charge of the bank, he's got the bus line, he got the department stores, and now he's after us. Why? Well, it's very simple. Because we're cutting in on his business, that's why. And because he wants to keep you living in his slums and paying the kind of rent he decides. Joe, you had one of those Potter houses, didn't you? Well, have you forgotten? Have you forgotten what he charged you for that broken-down shack? Here, Ed, you remember last year when things weren't going so well and you couldn't make your payments? Well, you didn't lose your house, did you? You think Potter would have let you keep it? Can't you understand what's happening here? Don't you see what's happening? Potter isn't selling, Potter's buying. And why? Because we're panicky and he's not, that's why. He's picking up some bargain. Now, we can get through this thing all right. We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
That small residue of exiled Republican aristocracy who still believes that there's still a chance to reclaim their Republican Party. Now they have a future candidate. Her name is Liz Cheney, and she can now run as a centrist.
You know, when everyone else was being divisive.
Both sides, really.
When everyone else was being divisive and throwing eggs at each other and shouting names, she reached across the aisle, Blue Gal. She put country over party, Blue Gal.
She put country over party, Driftglass.
She's the real hero. She's the real hero funny. Here. Now, there was one other interesting item about that PBS roundtable. This is the headline for the clip on the YouTube we just played, the audio we just played. Quote, Brooks and Atkins store on if there's a double standard for what Trump and Harris say. So the subject, according to PBS, of the video you're about to watch is on the double standard in the media today, and Brooks and Atkins store are going to talk about it. That's David Brooks of the New York fucking Times and Kimberly Atkins store of the Boston Globe. Except that's not what happened. She was asked a question about asymmetry in the media. Now, we all know what the questioner's talking about, what the host is talking about. He's not naming names. He talks in very generic terms about people and what people think and how people come to their facts. But PBS is very, very frightened of making Republicans angry. So they never say anything that will offend them at all. So, but she answers generically, yeah, there's asymmetry, but this and that, and people this, and so on and so forth. It's a bad answer, but it's an answer. Now, David Brooks' answer. Guess what David Brooks had to say about it, Blue Gal? Nothing.
Didn't they change the subject? I think
Nothing.
They would.
Not a fucking word. Because before, remember, this is the chief offender in the asymmetry of the media is the New York Times. One of the most pernicious offenders at the New York Times of false dichotomy, of asymmetry, of both sides do it, of both siderism, of false equivalence is David fucking Brooks. So there is the sinner sitting across from you from the paper that is the worst offender in the question you have just asked. And the host sweeps in and says, David, what do you think of Liz Cheney?
Yeah.
Spares him the I don't know, the embarrassment, the ignominy of either stammering for 10 minutes about why asymmetry is bad. Sure, it's bad. Asymmetry is bad. Both sides agree asymmetry is bad. Or some bullshit like that. Or just lying. Because David Brooks, if you put him in a corner and ask him a blunt question about what he has done in the past that he doesn't want to admit, he will lie to you. But yeah, they just blew right past it. And that was such a break in protocol that caught my attention, because PBS has a pattern. They have a pattern. You have a bland centrist host. You have a sort of leftist person and a sort of rightist person. And the host, it's as patterned and as cadenced as square dancing. The host asks a question, the one on the left or the right answers it, and the one on the right or the left responds to that, and then they laugh a little bit, and they might talk about it a little bit more, then they move on. It's always the same, always the same. So when the host broke symmetry and didn't ask David Brooks about what the fuck is going on with the media, that jumped right out at me like, oh, I get it. You are really on the shit list. You really don't want to talk about this. But somebody brought it up, and it's kind of a big story, so we kind of have to brush past it. But I'm not going to have David Brooks put in a position where he has to look like an idiot or lie. So let's move on to the subject of Liz Cheney and what a glorious bunch of principled people the Cheneys have always been.
And how in 2010 a hostile takeover of the actual polite Republican Party by Trump and MAGA.
Yeah. By Republicans.
Outsiders. They were outsiders. It's a myth. It's just a myth that he really believes in, apparently.
Or he's willing to die with the lie. One of the two.
Right. Speaking of the media being in the tank for Trump drift glass, this week the word sane washing, coined by Parker Malloy, bless her heart, took off as fast as truthiness and dumpster fire, and for the same reason.
Yeah.
Each of those terms finally gave a perfect name to something we could all see that no one could quite put into words. And hat tip drift glass for coining dumpster fire.
Yeah.
$5 drift glass.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me.
And suddenly someone says exactly the right word and everyone goes, that's it. Like calling Rumpelstiltskin by his true name. It gives us power over something that we thought was out of reach or beyond our ability to understand. The media is sane-washing Donald Trump, putting his nutty statements,
gibberish,
that make no sense, and say, well, what he means is this coherent policy about childcare, which, by the way, is incredibly insulting to women in particular.
Yes.
Once again. And every writer knows this is the magic of language.
100%.
This week we discovered the absolute upper limit of the language that is permissible to use on MSNBC to criticize the media.
Yes, we did.
And I have to give credit to Lawrence O'Donnell. The subject was tariffs, and on Monday night, Lawrence O'Donnell said this.
There was a time not long ago when everyone at the New York Times, and I mean everyone, including the printers and the delivery truck drivers, knew what a tariff is. Now it appears no one at the New York Times knows what a tariff is, including their top reporters covering the presidential campaign. This New York Times article allows Donald Trump to say that his tariffs would be taxing foreign nations. The New York Times allows that to stand as a fact in its campaign reporting. And that means that the New York Times campaign coverage and the New York Times economic coverage is hopelessly lost in this campaign. How slowly do I have to say it for the New York Times campaign reporters to understand it for the very first time?
O'Donnell noted that at last, New York Times headline writers seem to have been momentarily bludgeoned into writing a nearly accurate headline. Presumably because of the tidal wave of criticism and cancellation of subscriptions coming from every quarter except Fox News. On the other hand, there's a punchline to this story. While O'Donnell repeats the words New York Times several times and mentions, quote, top reporters covering the presidential campaign, unquote, and reads from the actual article that lies about the definition of tariffs. Like the story of Rumpelstiltskin, O'Donnell cannot say the name of the author of the article. And I thank you so much, Driftglass, for pointing this out. Because I was giving Lawrence O'Donnell a lot of credit for actually reading an article in the New York Times, holding it up, pointing to where the lie is, and saying, this must end.
Right.
But you took it one step further and noted.
I did.
The byline of this article, which now that I've said that, everybody out there in podcast land, can you guess? Can you guess who it might be?
Oh. Blue Gal, I'd like Peter Baker for 1,000, please.
You are right, Driftglass. It is Peter Baker. Peter Baker, who might be a Let's Get Smarter with our friend Peter Baker and be in the following hour of MSNBC on the 11th hour, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
He might be in the A block right after Lawrence.
So you can't say his name.
You can't say, Peter Baker, why aren't you doing your job?
Because Peter Baker works and at the same place that Lawrence O'Donnell works. And you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to call him out.
By name. By name.
Yeah. We also want to thank Mark Jacobs for catching this pure example of New York Times log rolling. Quote, the New York Times' Michael M. Greenbaum writes that moderators Dana Bash and Jake Tapper won praise for their even-keeled style in the previous debate. And he links to a story by Michael M. Greenbaum, in which the only person praising their performance was Michael M. Greenbaum.
That goes in the Smithsonian. Yeah. That goes in the Broadcast Museum. That's just fucking perfect. I mean, really. It doesn't get more log rolly and circle jerky than that. That's masturbating in zero gravity, Blue Gal. Finally, because the media universe, is not already ridiculously lopsided enough in favor of the right, this is coming to us from CNN's reliable sources. Quote, Leonard Leo wants to get into the media biz. Oh, joy. In a rare interview with FT's Alex Rogers, the architect of the rightward shift of the Supreme Court under Trump, Leonard Leo says his nonprofit advocacy group is, quote, making a $1 billion push to crush liberal dominance across corporate America and the country's news and entertainment sectors. All that liberal dominance, Blue Gal, that we enjoy every day. Those Soros checks, the Kremlin checks, we're drowning in this stuff. Key passage, Leo, quote, intends to invest in a U.S. local media company in the next 12 months, although he has not decided which, unquote. So, now we get to play which crappy companies he's going to throw his money at. Bingo. Sinclair, sure, they'll take your money. The National Desk, News Nation, Glenn Greenwald's Bumble channel, Greenwald and Matt Taibbi on Firing Line, 12 hours a day. So many choices of crap media that could benefit from $1 billion boost. Tim Pool's going to be looking for money pretty soon.
Tim Pool's looking for work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we'll do a news roundup on Thursday, but until then, feel free to write us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise.
Do not forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. We're not going to get any of that Leonard Leo money, so we're going to need you to kick in a few bucks now and then. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. It's getting chilly out there. I'm not a pumpkin spice fan, but if you are, go ahead and throw that pumpkin spice money our way, and we'll really appreciate it because this is not charity. This is actually our job. If you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/ProLeftPod. Also, a thing you could do for us that we really would appreciate is sharing our show on social media. And if you love this podcast, please get someone else to listen to. And thank you for doing that.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties are going to sit back, fire up YouTube, and watch the Kennedy-Nixon debate tonight.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with the switchblade knife. Let's think
Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.